our family's annual holiday gathering, I overheard a whisper that froze me in place. "I can't handle her anymore," my daughter-in-law murmured to my niece. "Maybe it's time she moved somewhere with more help." My gift to her that evening would change everything. Before we dive in, make sure to stay until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm golden glow across my living room as I carried a tray of eggnog back toward the kitchen. The house was filled with laughter, soft music, and the sound of my grandchildren playing, the kind of moments that made all the years of hard work worth it. "Need a hand, Mom?" my son James called from the couch without looking up. "I'm fine, dear," I said, though my hands ached and my knees protested every step. I never liked to complain. Then I heard it. Two quiet voices coming from the hallway. I hadn't meant to listen, but something in their tone made me stop. "I'm at my limit," my daughter-in-law Margot whispered. "She's getting so difficult. I've been looking into places, nice ones." My chest tightened. They can only be talking about me. "What about the house?" my niece asked softly. "James is her only child," Margot replied. "Once she's settled somewhere else, we could finally breathe. This place is worth at least $700,000. In that moment, everything clicked. They weren't just thinking about my comfort. They were planning their future. I should have confronted them right then, but instead I did what I've always done, held my head high, smiled, and walked away. Some pain runs too deep for quick words. 20 minutes later, it was time for our Secret Santa exchange. My son announced, "Mom's gift to Margot." I had spent months searching for something meaningful, a vintage emerald brooch that once belonged to my grandmother, passed down through generations. I'd intended to give it to my granddaughter someday. But this year I thought maybe giving it to Margot could bring peace. As she opened the little velvet box, her eyes widened. "Oh, I can't possibly accept this," she said, clearly stunned. "I want you to have it," I replied calmly. "Your family." Her cheeks flushed red as she stood to thank me. Then, in her surprise, she stumbled backward, nearly falling, still clutching the brooch. The room filled with worried voices. James rushed to her side. Only I stayed seated, watching quietly. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, I just wasn't expecting this," she stammered. Our eyes met across the room. In hers, I saw guilt and the flicker of realization that I might have heard every word from that hallway. I smiled gently. "Merry Christmas, dear." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The tea beside me grew cold as tears blurred my vision. The family I'd given my life for had been planning to send me away. But as the clock struck midnight, something inside me changed. If they thought I was too old to fight back, they were mistaken. They might believe they're planning my future, but they have no idea what I'm planning for theirs. I baked cookies with my grandchildren, accepted James and Margot's dinner invites, and smiled through every moment as if my heart hadn't been shattered. But underneath that calm, I was different, watchful, calculating, and finally connecting dots I'd chosen to ignore for years. It began with small things. Margot's theatrical sighs whenever I mentioned my arthritis, the way James exchanged looks with her when I forgot a minor detail, as if they were checking against some private script about my mental sharpness. They carefully avoided talking about future family events at my home. Everything felt rehearsed. On New Year's Day, I decided to drop by unannounced, something I'd never done before. Margot had rules about visits I'd always respected, but that morning I carried a platter of homemade cinnamon rolls and broke my own habit. "Mom." James looked genuinely surprised when he opened the door. "We weren't expecting you." "I brought something for breakfast," I said, holding up the platter. "Is this a bad time?" Before he could answer, I heard hurried whispers coming from the dining room. James's eyes flicked that way. No, come in," he said, stepping aside. "Margot's just finishing some work." In the dining room, Margot was hunched over her laptop, frantically closing browser tabs. Brochures and printouts lay spread across the table. She was stuffing them into a folder. "Oh, Jody," she said with an oddly high voice. "What a surprise. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I set the cinnamon rolls down and deliberately glanced at the papers she'd been hiding. One brochure read Golden Sunset Assisted Living across the top. Another sheet showed legal-sounding language about capacity and guardianship. They weren't merely entertaining a vague idea, they were actively planning it, researching facilities and legal routes to take control of my affairs if I resisted. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Well, don't let me disturb you. I'll put these in the kitchen." As I turned, my eye caught a crayon drawing on the fridge. My grandson's artwork. A big house with 4 stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, Me, and Liam. Above it, in uneven letters, the caption read, "Our new home." It hit me like a blow. They weren't just talking about moving me out. They'd already started telling the children they were moving into my house. The house I'd paid off 15 years ago, where I'd raised James with his father before cancer took him. The house I'd kept up on my own while James offered financial help that, I now saw, carried invisible strings. "James!" I called, my voice hollow. "When were you planning to tell me you're moving into my home?" Silence. James appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I interrupted, suddenly tired of the half-truths. Margot stepped forward. "We were going to talk to you after you'd had some time to think about your future," she said. "You're alone in that big house. It doesn't make sense." "And who decided that?" I asked. "You, Mom," James replied, slipping into that same condescending tone he used with the kids. "We're worried about you. You've been forgetting things. The house is getting to be too much." "Forgetting things?" I echoed. "You mean like when I couldn't remember which day we moved your dental appointment last month? That's not proof of anything." Margot jumped in with the stove story, the fall, the accidents. "We're concerned something worse will happen when no one's around." I stared at them strangers wearing familiar faces. "The stove wasn't proof. You called me away to help with Liam while dinner was on. The fall? Your new puppy tripped me. Are those really the best examples you can find?" They exchanged pitying looks, and in that exchange, I saw the truth. This was never about my well-being. It was about my house, my assets, and their impatience to claim them. "I think I should go," I said quietly, turning for the door. "Mom, wait," James started. "No." For the first time, I let my anger surface. "I've waited long enough. I've waited for you to treat me like a person with dignity, not a problem to solve. I'm done waiting." I left, my legs steady even as the ground seemed to tilt beneath me. Driving home past the familiar landmarks of the neighborhood where I'd spent most of my adult life, one truth crystallized. It was time to prepare. Not to surrender, but to fight. They thought I was just a fragile old woman, someone easy to manage, easy to silence. To them, I was nothing more than a stepping stone to what they wanted. What they forgot was who I used to be before I became Grandma Jody. I was the woman who lost her husband at 45 and still managed to keep our home, raise a son, and run a business on my own. I had walked through fire and learned how to survive it. So as I pulled into the driveway of the house they were so eager to claim, one thing became clear. This would not end the way they expected. By the time I reached my front door, I'd made up my mind. If they wanted to play games, I'd play smarter. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. The first person I called wasn't family. It was my oldest friend, Eleanor Winters, a retired attorney and the one person who'd seen me through every storm. My husband's illness, single parenthood, widowhood. This time I didn't need her comfort. I needed her strategy. "They want to do what?" Eleanor's voice practically crackled with outrage from 3 states away. "Put me in a facility and take my house," I repeated, the words burning as I said them. "And from what I saw, they're even considering declaring me incompetent if I refuse." Eleanor inhaled sharply. "Jody, listen carefully. Before you do anything else, start documenting everything. Times, dates, conversations. Get a small voice recorder. Georgia is a one-party consent state, so you're fully within your rights. And most importantly, don't let them see you're preparing. The second they realize you're pushing back, they'll move faster. I wrote down every word. She helped me outline a plan closing shared accounts, scheduling medical evaluations, gathering proof of my mental clarity, drafting a new will. It felt like stepping into a war room. The next morning, I went to see Dr. Collins, my physician of 20 years. "Full cognitive assessment?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Any reason?" "My family's worried about me," I said evenly. "I'd just like it on record that I'm managing perfectly well." He studied me for a moment, understanding immediately. 2 hours later, I left with paperwork confirming what I already knew. I was as sharp as ever, with only the tiny lapses any normal person my age might have. My next stop was Meridian Bank, where I'd had an account since before James was born. "I'd like to close our joint account," I told the manager, sliding over my ID. "Of course, Mrs. Bradley. Where shall we transfer the funds?" "To a new account, under my name only." By the end of the week, most of my finances were moved somewhere safe, leaving just enough behind to keep appearances. I also spoke with a new attorney someone Eleanor recommended, who specialized in elder law. Together, we began quietly collecting evidence of the subtle manipulations I'd ignored for too long. Margot rearranging my medications so I'd lose track. James remarking on my forgetfulness at family dinners. Little hints about how nice assisted living communities could be. Every incident went into a journal, dates, times, details. The pattern was unmistakable. They were crafting a narrative to make me seem fragile, dependent, and ready to hand over control. Outwardly, I played the part. I agreed when Margot said I must be tired. I nodded when James hinted the house was too much. I even paused mid-sentence sometimes, pretending to search for words. "See what I mean?" Margot would whisper. "It's getting worse." But behind that mask, I was building a defense. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, joined a book club and a water aerobics class, consulted a financial advisor to strengthen my retirement funds, and most importantly, I started testing the loyalty of those around me. Over lunch one afternoon, I mentioned to my sister-in-law, Caroline, that James and Margot seemed concerned about my living situation. "Oh, they've been talking about that for months," she said before freezing mid-sentence. "It's all right," I told her gently. "How long have you known?" Her eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was uncovering just how deep this betrayal ran. They thought they had me cornered. What they didn't realize was that every move they made was falling neatly into place right where I wanted them. Caroline's confession had confirmed everything. Margot's manipulation went deeper than I imagined. She'd been planting stories for months, twisting innocent moments into signs of decline. By the time we parted, I had another ally and enough evidence to prove that my son and his wife weren't concerned for me. They were strategizing around me. That night, I sat on the back porch, watching the fireflies rise from the garden my late husband had planted, the same patch of earth where James had taken his first steps. Every corner of this home held something sacred: love, grief, resilience. They wanted to claim it like it was just real estate. But I'd already decided if they wanted a game, I'd give them one they'd never forget. My phone buzzed. "James, dropping by tomorrow to help with that loose railing. Maybe we can talk about some options to make things easier for you." I smiled. Let them come. Let them think I was finally giving in. "That would be lovely, dear," I texted back. "I'll make your favorite coffee cake." The board was set. The pieces were moving. The game had begun. February came with unseasonable warmth, and with it, a sudden wave of false concern. James was suddenly stopping by every day, tightening screws that didn't need tightening, oiling hinges that didn't squeak. Margot showed up with casseroles, labeled with reheating instructions in giant print, as if I'd forgotten how to use my own microwave. One evening, James stood in my bathroom, installing a grab bar that absolutely no one had asked for. "Mom," he began carefully, "we've been thinking. Maybe it's time to consider some options." "Options?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "For the future," he said, glancing at Margot. This house is big for one person, and the stairs, well, oh, I murmured, soft and unsure. You think I should move? The relief on his face was almost touching. There are some wonderful communities we've looked into, like Golden Sunset. They have staff, activities, everything you'd need. I widened my eyes. But what about my home? All my things? He smiled that careful, patronizing smile. We'll take care of everything. You just choose what you want to keep. The rest, we could sell or... He paused, trying to sound casual. Distribute among the family. I nearly laughed. His greed was practically shining through his smile. I don't know, James, I said softly. This is all so sudden. Just think about it. No rush, he said, though his tone told a different story. By the way, where do you keep your important papers? We should probably organize those too. I could almost applaud the performance. Almost. They're in the study somewhere, I said vaguely. I'll look for them. That night, I called Eleanor. They're accelerating, I told her. James asked about my papers today. Perfect, she replied, amusement in her voice. That means they'll take the bait. The bait was Eleanor's masterpiece, a fabricated paper trail that suggested I had far more wealth than they knew, a Florida condo inherited from a cousin, investment accounts they'd never heard of, a life insurance policy that would make anyone's eyes widen. I even left a few bank statements showing transfers to mysterious accounts and brochures for luxury senior communities in Florida, scribbled with notes like possible winter home. If they wanted to see me as a frail old woman, I'd make that image work for me. 2 weeks later, everything was ready. I'd staged a series of forgetful moments calling James from the grocery store, claiming I couldn't remember where I parked, skipping a medication dose by accident, even sighing about how overwhelmed I felt with bills. I kept mentioning my financial advisor, Eleanor's son Richard, who was happily playing his part. Then I made the call that would spring the trap. James, I said in a deliberately shaky voice, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right. The house is just too much for me. The speed at which they arrived was almost impressive. Margot's smile was radiant, James's tone dripping with rehearsed concern. I've decided to get my affairs in order, I told them, sitting at the kitchen table where we'd shared countless family dinners. Before I make any big decisions. That's so responsible, Jody, Margot said, barely hiding her excitement. I gathered all my important papers, I said, gesturing to the folder on the table. My will, bank records, insurance policies. I thought we could review them together. James reached for it so quickly you'd think it was a winning lottery ticket. As they flipped through the pages, I watched the emotions flicker across their faces, confusion, disbelief, and finally, pure greed. Mom, James said slowly, I had no idea about the Florida property, or these investments. Oh, that? I waved a hand dismissively. Cousin Martha left me her condo years ago, hardly ever use it. And the investments? Those were your father's idea. They've done well. Margot's eyes practically gleamed. And you've been handling all this yourself? Well, I said with a small, knowing smile, Richard helps me. He's such a dear, always making sure everything's handled properly. They exchanged a look, a familiar one. The look of two people recalculating their next move. Little did they know, I'd already decided mine. Mom, James began, his voice suddenly soft, the tone people use with someone they think is fragile. This is a lot for you to handle on your own. Maybe we should meet with Richard together, make sure everything's properly set up for your future care. I smiled, masking the thrill of victory rising in my chest. That's a wonderful idea, I said warmly. He's coming next week to help me update my will. I'll tell him you'll both be joining us. For a brief second, I saw it, the spark of triumph in Margot's eyes. They thought they'd won. As they walked out to their car, their voices carried through the driveway, low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The plan was in motion. Phase 1, complete. Now came Phase 2. That evening, I made 2 calls. The first was to Eleanor. They're all in, I told her. Hook, line, and sinker. Excellent, she replied crisply. Is Richard still coming Thursday? Right on schedule, I confirmed, and I've invited a few new friends to join us. Those friends were not what James and Margot would expect. A retired judge, a geriatric specialist from Dr. Collins's office, and Caroline, my sister-in-law, who'd finally seen through their lies. They'd be there not as guests, but as witnesses. My second call was to a locksmith. By midnight, every lock in the house had been changed. If my dear son or his wife decided to check in early or snoop around for those fictional assets, they'd find themselves locked out of their own scheme. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. For years, I'd been the one cornered, guilted, dismissed, managed. Not anymore. They thought they were orchestrating this story. They didn't realize I'd rewritten the ending. Thursday arrived with the quiet tension of an approaching storm. I baked cookies, set out coffee, and checked the tiny recorder concealed under a lace doily on the coffee table. The documents Eleanor and I had prepared sat neatly in a folder, every detail, carefully designed to expose them. At precisely 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. James stood on my porch in his rarely worn blazer. Margot was beside him, polished and smiling a little too brightly. "Mom, you look wonderful," James said, kissing my cheek. But his eyes darted past me, scanning the room. "Is Richard here yet?" "He'll be along shortly," I said with practiced calm. "Let's chat first." Margot immediately produced a folder of her own, sliding glossy brochures across the coffee table. "We've brought some information about Golden Sunset," she said sweetly. "They have an opening in their premium wing. We've already put down a deposit to hold it." I lifted an eyebrow. "A deposit? That's very generous." "It's refundable," James blurted quickly. "We just didn't want to lose the opportunity. The waiting list is long." "How thoughtful," I murmured, watching them exchange glances. Margot leaned closer, lowering her voice. "We've been talking with Dr. Mercer. You remember him from the Christmas party? He thinks it's best to make this transition soon." I smiled to myself. So now they're inventing medical advice. "How interesting," I said. "And what about my home? My belongings?" "Oh, we'd take care of everything," James said, almost too quickly. "And the Florida property?" I asked softly. "Would you manage that too?" Their eyes lit up instantly. "Absolutely," Margot said. "We could handle all your properties and investments." Just then, the doorbell rang again. "That must be Richard," I said lightly, rising to answer it. It wasn't. Instead, in walked Dr. Collins, my longtime physician, followed by Judge Wilson, Caroline, and Eleanor. Their timing was impeccable. James froze. "What's this?" he demanded. "Just a few friends joining our discussion," I replied calmly. "I hope you don't mind." The color drained from Margot's face as everyone took a seat. Moments later, Richard arrived, briefcase in hand, the picture of professionalism. "Now that we're all here," I began, my voice stronger than it had been in years, "I'd like to clarify a few things." I turned to Dr. Collins. "Doctor, would you mind sharing the results of my recent cognitive assessment?" He nodded, opening a folder. "Mrs. Bradley is in excellent cognitive health for her age. There is no evidence of dementia or any impairment affecting her decision-making ability." Silence. Margot flushed crimson. "With all due respect, doctor, we've noticed concerning behaviors at home." "Like what?" I asked sharply, turning to her. "Forgetting where I parked the time you moved my car to help me? Or leaving the stove on after you called me away? Perhaps you mean the supplements you reorganized so I'd think I'd missed my medication?" Margot's mouth opened, then closed again. James shifted uncomfortably. I folded my hands, meeting their eyes one by one. "Because if those are your concerns, I'd say they speak more to manipulation than to memory loss." The room went still, only the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the air. I wasn't the frail woman they'd imagined, and they were just beginning to realize it. James looked pale, the color draining from his face. "Mom." "What are you saying?" he asked, voice trembling between fear and disbelief. "I'm saying," I began steadily, That I heard you and Margot whispering at Christmas planning to put me in a nursing home so you could take my house. I'm saying I've documented months of your attempts to make me look incompetent, and I'm saying it stops today." The silence that followed was suffocating. Margot recovered first, her mask snapping back into place. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "You're confused, paranoid. This just proves our point." "Actually," Eleanor cut in, her tone cool and precise, "Jody has recordings of your conversations. Perfectly legal in this state, by the way. She also has witnesses to your attempts to interfere with her medical and financial affairs." Judge Wilson cleared his throat, his deep voice carrying weight. "If these claims are true," he said gravely, "this would fall under elder exploitation, and I take that very seriously." James looked stricken, his polished facade cracked like thin glass. "Mom?" he stammered. "There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said firmly. "You've been plotting this for months, and if I hadn't caught you, you would have gone through with it." I turned to Richard, who remained poised and professional. "Would you explain the new arrangements, please?" Richard opened his briefcase and removed a folder. "Mrs. Bradley has made amendments to her will," he said clearly, "and placed her home in an irrevocable trust, meaning it cannot be sold during her lifetime. She's also appointed new medical and financial powers of attorney." "New?" Margot whispered. "Yes," I said evenly. "Neither of you will ever have control over my care or my property again." James's composure shattered. "But the Florida condo, the investments!" I laughed, a genuine, unrestrained laugh that surprised even me. "There is no Florida condo, James, no secret accounts. It was bait, and you took it hook, line, and sinker." The truth hit them like a wave. Margot's lips parted, but no words came. James's shoulders sagged. Carolyn, who had been quiet until now, shook her head in disgust. "You were going to put your own mother away for a house," she said, her voice trembling. "How could you?" James turned to me, eyes filling with tears. "Mom, please, we were just worried about you. We wanted to make sure you were cared for." "Save it," I said, lifting a hand. "I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." I stood, feeling taller, lighter than I had in years. "I'm not cutting you out of my life. You're still my son, and I'll always love you. But things will be different now. There will be boundaries, and there will be consequences." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. "This meeting," I added, "is over. I'll reach out when I'm ready." They left in silence, shoulders slumped. But as James paused at the door, I caught a glimpse of something unexpected in his eyes. Shame. Real, human shame. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Go home, James," I said softly. "Think about who you've become and who you want to be." The door closed behind them, and for the first time in months, I breathed freely in my own home. 6 months later. Time has a way of healing, even if it never forgets. As summer melted into autumn, the trees in my backyard burst into brilliant gold and red, a perfect reflection of the transformation within me. After that day, James and Margot disappeared into silence. No calls, no visits, not even a message about the grandchildren. I expected the emptiness to ache, but instead, I found peace in the quiet. Caroline stepped in, bringing my grandchildren for weekend visits. She made sure they understood that Grandma's house was still full of warmth, love, and cookies fresh from the oven. "They miss you," she told me one afternoon, "especially James. He's not the same." I nodded, neither forgiving nor condemning. "He'll have to find his own way back," I said simply. My new life took shape like the seasons changing. The book club I'd joined as part of my cover became something real, my weekly joy. Water aerobics twice a week strengthened both my body and my laughter. I surrounded myself with women who'd walked through their own storms, loss, betrayal, reinvention, and come out stronger. "You should see your face these days," Eleanor teased one afternoon. "You're glowing." "Freedom suits me," I told her. And it did. Freedom meant painting my living room in the bright, joyful colors Margot once called too loud. It meant turning James's old bedroom into an art studio and rediscovering my love for painting. It meant a spontaneous week at the coast with friends, something I'd never allowed myself before. Then, 3 months after the confrontation, a letter arrived, handwritten, from James. No excuses, no manipulations, just a short message. "Mom, I'm sorry, truly. No defenses this time. I know what I did and I hate the person I became. When you're ready, I'd like to talk." I waited a month before answering, spoke with Eleanor, talked things through with my therapist, another new, healthy habit. When I finally called him, I suggested we meet in neutral territory, a small cafe downtown. He was already there when I arrived, sitting nervously by the window, looking older somehow. His hands trembled slightly around a cup of untouched coffee. "Mom?" he began softly, voice breaking. I don't even know where to start." "How about the truth?" I suggested gently. James nodded, eyes downcast. "That's always a good place to start." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I got lost somewhere along the way. Margot and things haven't been good. The business is failing. We're behind on the mortgage. And when she started talking about how much easier things would be if we just had your house, it sounded like a solution." "A solution," I said quietly, "that required erasing my independence." He flinched, shame flickering across his face. "Yes, it was wrong, completely wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. I just needed you to know I see what I did now, what I almost became." His voice faltered. "Margot and we're separated. 2 months now. After everything happened, I started noticing other patterns, how she manipulated not just you, but me, the kids, everyone." Without thinking, I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm sorry for that part of it, James." "Don't be," he said firmly. "It needed to happen. I needed to wake up." We talked for hours that day, 3, maybe more unraveling years of misunderstanding, guilt, and pain. He cried when I told him what it felt like to overhear their Christmas plotting. I cried when he explained how completely he'd been convinced that I was slipping, how carefully Margot had shaped that illusion over time. "I want to earn back your trust," he said finally, standing to leave, "however long it takes." "It'll take time," I told him honestly, "but we have that now." Rebuilding. The healing didn't happen overnight. It came slowly, carefully, like the first green buds after a long winter. Sunday dinners became our quiet ritual, just the 2 of us. Sometimes the grandchildren joined, their laughter filling the house again. Every interaction followed the new rules I'd set: respect, honesty, and no assumptions about my abilities. I maintained my independence fiercely. When James offered to fix something, I only accepted if I truly needed it. When he suggested a family gathering, I didn't automatically say yes. I decided for myself. It was balance, love without self-sacrifice, connection without losing myself. 6 months later. On a crisp October evening, exactly 6 months after the confrontation, I hosted a dinner party, the kind I hadn't had in years. Around my table sat my new, reconstructed circle: James, now attending alone, Caroline and her husband, my grandchildren, Eleanor and her son Richard, and several of the wonderful women from my book club and water aerobics class. As I carried out dessert, a warm apple pie baked with fruit from my garden, I paused, taking in the sight. Laughter drifted through the same room that had once echoed with tension and deceit. My home felt whole again, not a prize to be fought over, but a sanctuary I chose to share with those who valued me. "Everything okay, Mom?" James asked, noticing my stillness. I smiled, feeling the full weight of the past year, the pain, the fight, and the forgiveness. "Everything," I said softly, "is exactly as it should be." Later, after everyone left and James stayed behind to help with dishes, he asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you think you'll ever fully trust me again?" I thought carefully before answering. "I trust the man you're becoming," I said finally. The one who's doing the hard work to change. That's enough for now. He nodded, accepting that truth quietly. When he left, I wandered through my house, touching the walls, the photographs, the things that told my story. This home had seen my greatest joys and deepest grief. It had nearly become a battlefield of betrayal, but instead, it had become something far more powerful, a stage for redemption. Not just for James, for me. I had rediscovered strength I thought I'd lost, built friendships beyond family, and learned one unshakable truth. It's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, and to rewrite the story others try to tell about you. As I readied for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The same lines, the same silver hair, the same aging face James and Margot once saw as weakness, but now I saw something different: wisdom in those lines, dignity in that silver, resilience in every inch of me. I smiled at my reflection and made a quiet promise to the woman staring back. I will never again let anyone make me believe I am less than I am. The true inheritance of that painful year wasn't property or money, it was myself. Whole, worthy, and finally, free.